Hi, I'm Lisa,
And I'm Ray.
and you're listening to
This Midlife Hustle.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about our hustle history.
That's right. We're going to tell the story of how we went from bankruptcy to business owners.
Yep.
Do you want to get started on the bankruptcy part of that?
You can.
All right. Well, we were young in college. I went back to college. I guess we'll skip the uninteresting parts of the story, but going back to college, you were working me through college, basically,
Three
for
jobs.
the most part. Yeah. And I eventually got an internship. So, we didn't have a lot of money, but we spent like we did.
Yeah.
We put, furniture and various things on credit cards and lived way beyond our means, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we did. We spent more than we should have. We should have been saving,
Planning. Right. We did all the things you're not supposed to do. We didn't really save much in our 401k.
No.
Spent more than we had, bought, cars and furniture and lived in apartments that we couldn't really afford.
Right.
And we paid for that eventually. It caught up to us. I hope to think we learned something from it, but we did end up going bankruptcy at one point in those early days. Then I guess fast forward from that, I learned my lessons, but then we had a couple strange turns of life. My career was going well. I had several high-paying jobs. Nortel is where I started my career, but then Oracle and Fujitsu. We bought a new house in the upstate New York area after having a house in Virginia, and we relocated for family reasons. And then right after we relocated and bought that new house, Fujitsu laid me off.
Yeah.
And that big cushy job that I had in the middle of nowhere, being paid a California salary in the middle of upstate New York, went away. And at the same time, if you remember, an oil crisis hit us, and all of a sudden, to fill up our heating fuel went from $500 every 3 months to $2,000 every 3 months.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
It was hard. It was a hard time. Between you losing your job, me being a stay-at-home mom, and not knowing what was coming, and trying to find another job.
Yeah, and I was used to high-paying tech jobs, so I didn't really want to settle for just a simple old, website admin kind of job at the time that were popular. I distinctly remember in the dead of winter needing to go down to Hess gas station to fill up some 5-gallon kerosene buckets just to put some heat in the tank so that we can have some heat through the night.
Yeah.
Those were some tough times.
Yeah.
So out of that, necessity was born.
Yeah.
I didn't have a job and was still looking. And you were used to being a stay-at-home mom, and we had 3 kids to raise.
Yeah.
So
sports. They were in sports, and we were trying to keep everything normal for them.
Yep.
So that way they wouldn't know what was going on.
So I don't remember who had the idea to do the daycare. Was that you or me?
That was me.
Yeah,
that
so
was me.
It was like the mentality was, well, I'm home watching kids anyways. I might as well get paid. I think actually you were working at the school maybe, right?
Yeah, our youngest was 3 going to preschool. So those days that she was in preschool, I worked as a teacher's aide in the school district.
Right. And I think you knew of some people who needed somebody to watch kids.
Before and after care. So yeah, so we started like a before and after care. So there was not enough good daycare in our area.
Right. So we saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
And you decided to start watching kids. You kind of left that job because it wasn't paying much anyways.
Yeah.
You were just an aide, I think.
Yeah.
And then you started making, it wasn't much at first, but you turned that into we opened up what was known as Mother Hen's Daycare back in the day. We grew that from just at first watching a couple kids to watching more than a few kids, and then becoming a state registered daycare facility out of our home.
Yeah. And then we got so popular. Now we actually had a waiting list.
Right.
That we went to group.
We went we became a group daycare, watching over 10 children. And that was kind of interesting, I guess, as in the context of this podcast, we learned some good lessons from that first business. We learned how to run a business at all.
Yeah.
Simple things like filing taxes, dealing with state procedures.
Billing, filing, charging the people. We had, remember, bounce checks.
Collecting payments. That's right. And advertising, how to advertise and get our word out.
Yeah.
We had a custom logo design for us at the time. I set up a custom website.
Yeah.
So that was all part of advertising and marketing.
Yeah, but word got out there pretty fast. I mean, it was pretty incredible how we grew.
Yeah, and I think
with something that was just supposed to be like a a temporary get over the hump until you found something that ended up being
right.
something pretty big.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I'd have to open up the books from back then, but I remember you telling me, like, I mean, infants used to get somewhere around $200 a week. Most kids got around $150 a week. Let's just say you averaged at least $150 a week. You had 10 kids at one point.
Yeah, that's when we went to group.
Yeah, so that was $1,500 a week.
Yeah.
So that was $6,000 a month you were pulling in.
Yeah.
I mean, minus expenses.
Yeah.
There were some expenses.
But think about that for a minute. Now that we're thinking about it and doing this podcast, back then we were just so nervous and scared and keeping our life as normal as possible that I can't believe I was bringing in that much, because it came in and went straight back out.
That's right.
We needed
every penny of that went to a bill of one sort or another.
Yeah.
I mean, fuel for the oil tank was $2,000 every refill alone.
Yeah.
So, and then food and expenses and such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a lot. Now, just to get off the topic, just to get out like a little detour here, my sister asked me if she should do it because daycare now is extremely expensive.
I would imagine.
I would
with
probably,
inflation.
yeah, I would. If we were there and still doing it, it would probably be quadruple what we were bringing in.
Wow.
Because she said just for a part-time 2 days a week is $2,000 a month.
Man.
I believe her niece was quoted for 5 hours, 2 days a week, was $2,000 a month.
Well, I guess not to get stuck on the daycare topic for too long, but one of the things that one of the reasons why you stood out from the competition was because you literally did treat those kids like they were your own.
They were my own. They didn't want to go home.
And you had a great reputation.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw some daycare providers that would game the state system, like tell them they were giving kids meal and they would just give them some pretzels or something.
Yeah.
And they would only give them sandwiches when the state came for inspection.
Yeah.
They would like jam them all in an area that was unclean and unhealthy. And
those kids got home cooked meals. Like every Wednesday we had pasta spaghetti day. Those kids had pasta spaghetti day on Wednesdays.
Right. They really did.
They had whatever our kids had for breakfast, they had for breakfast. So there was no if I made waffles, it was homemade waffles. I mean, it was very different. That's why we got pretty popular pretty fast.
I guess we just discovered another lesson there too. It's like establishing a brand and a reputation, how important that is. You did it kind of, I would say almost accidentally, just because that's your nature to be that type of person. But we did learn that was one of our competitive aspects.
And I think we sat down, to backtrack just a little bit. I remember the day that we sat down and talked about what can we do, because at the time I had to finish my schooling and stuff like that. And, I didn't technically have any, education, college or a trade at the time. And we just brainstormed like crazy at the kitchen table.
Yeah, but it was great. I mean, we had an awesome logo and everything.
Yeah.
So from there, we learned a lot of lessons. But then there came a day that I eventually did get another job. I started becoming a government contractor, and I was able to work myself back up to a decent pay. Not at first, not working for the government, but the jobs that came after that.
Yeah.
I loved working for the government, but the pay was horrible. So I went to contracting. And there it was a more stable job. And we looked at it and said, you basically carried our family through once again.
Yeah.
Now it's time for me to carry you through again. What do you want to do? And I forgot, you trained for the police academy for a short period of time.
Oh my God. Yeah. I trained for, wow. Yeah. I wanted to be a nurse, cop, or a hairstylist.
Right.
Those were my three. That's what I wanted to be. That's what I was passionate about.
As a quick aside, why did you decide against the police academy?
I took the test once and I missed it by I think it was 2-3 questions.
The memorization type of test?
Yeah. And at the time I just figured, let me try something else. And I actually went to college for nursing. And if you guys don't know, my first language is Portuguese and English is my second. So reading and pronouncing words is very difficult for me sometimes. So
I don't think you've made up any words on this podcast podcast yet, but she will. You'll hear some made up words definitely, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Or stumbling or but so I did the nursing thing too. And again, I tried it once. I didn't commit fully like I did hair. And hair, I just committed fully.
Right. So So you went back to school. Talk about a side hustle. Like you went to school nights and weekends in Syracuse, which for us was about an hour drive each way. And from where we lived in central New York.
Still doing daycare.
Yeah, still doing daycare. And you did that grind for, I think,
a year?
I think it was almost 2 years because you had the one
part-time, yeah.
The one, I won't mention their name, the cosmetology school that I think they've went out of business because they were so horrible and you just didn't realize it at first, and then went to Continental for the remaining part of it and had an awesome experience there. So then let's talk about that transition into hair. But before we do that, if you're hanging in with us so far, you probably like what you're hearing, or you're just kind of hanging out with us, please hit the like button, subscribe to our podcast. It helps the numbers, it helps the algorithms, it helps support us so that we can keep doing this and know that somebody's out there listening to us and appreciates it.
Yep.
So that transition into hair, there's an interesting kind of side here that is related to our hustle history. Towards the end of that transition into hair, you were getting really frustrated, like you needed some stress relief. And I'd heard a roller derby advertisement on the radio.
Yeah.
And I said, you need to do that. Just go do that. It's good exercise, good stress relief. Yeah.
I fought you because I was looking at my schedule and I'm like, how and where? Where's I going to have the time?
Yeah.
And
so
you told me just go to the one night. Just go to the one night. And I came home and that was it. If I could do that professionally and get paid big time, that's another one that I would totally drop hair
right.
for. Yeah.
Risky because people get injured more than they should, I think. But yeah. So at that point in that transition phase, you were wrapping up your graduate studies course, like practice and studies in Syracuse at Continental.
Mm-hmm.
You were doing roller derby some nights and weekends.
Yep.
And you were still watching kids on the side.
During the day.
Here and there as well.
Yeah.
So those were some crazy times, but we got through it. And then you eventually transitioned into working a couple places, JCPenney and some other places, just to kind of get your bearings.
Yeah. To find the niche, to find the group of people I wanted to work with.
Yeah, but eventually realized like everybody else is always looking to kind of take advantage of you in that industry, which is, I think, still true to some degree. And then you became independent, which basically meant you were, again, running a small business. It was like a mini business.
Yeah.
You had to keep track of all your expenses and costs.
I also think having the daycare as our first business kind of showed me that even though it was a time thing, kids got dropped off at 6, kids got picked up at 5. It was my own business though. So if I wanted a week off, I would just be like, guys, I'm shutting down for this week. If you work for corporate, you can't do that. There's shifts to cover. I did try the whole management route. That worked for a little bit, but
you're skipping too far ahead now. But as far as the scheduling, you're saying that one of the things that you missed from running your own business and being that independent was that you had complete control of your schedule.
Complete control.
And your product line and your quality and your reputation. You had complete control over all that. When you work for somebody else, you lose control of all that.
You lose control of all of that. Plus, me working, at that point, you had a job. So our kids always came first. So whatever, you always told me I can do whatever I wanted as long as the kids came first, because that was my main job, was our kids. Even though you helped with sports, drop off, pick up, trainings with them and stuff like that. If one of them got sick, it would have to be wherever I worked, they had to understand that I had to leave to go pick them up from school because you could not.
Right. So but basically what you're saying is that it was inevitable that you'd end up being independent because
I had to, yeah.
Nothing else fit our lifestyle, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you could have, but it would have meant
it would. If I was in the middle
sacrifice.
of a highlight, I couldn't just get up and go. So, and thank God that when the kids needed me, you were home at that time. So
yeah, I basically shared part of that responsibility. So.
You'd get home with the kids, and dinner would be done, and I'm out the door.
Yep. And I would watch them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason we brought up the roller derby there is because kind of out of I guess altruistic perspective at first, just wanting to help. When you got involved with roller derby, I realized they were having trouble sourcing merchandise.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't sell things to make profit at bouts and stuff because not that they could have, but the profit margin would have been so small. So I started learning about how to print custom t-shirts, do, vinyl printing, dye sublimation, printing on mugs and other various things. And then I ended up and even buttons eventually.
Yeah.
bought all the equipment to do that. And it was a nice side hustle, but I think I wanted to bring that up because that's an example of something I really enjoyed. There was an aspect that I really enjoyed doing it, but it never really made me any money. I barely paid for the equipment I bought most of the time. And some of the equipment was like consumable, like because I wasn't doing it at a professional scale, I was doing these little hand hack jobbies where I was like taking a printer and converting it for dye sublimation. And it would last only so long. If I had complications with a certain print run, it was all on me. I was like eating through ink, burning print heads, and eventually just I had to replace it. And none of the money I ever made, I never made any money basically. All the money I made went into replacing equipment and such.
Yeah.
So that was an important lesson learned though, from the perspective of I think I learned an important lesson about the difference between a hobby and a business, because I don't know that I was officially trying to make it a business at the time, but I've many times thought about it. As you saw through the years, I guess I won't keep on bringing up those dotted instances. You were at several Derby organizations when we relocated in Maryland as well. And I did the same there. And during COVID, I did some prints. I did make some money off of buttons during COVID, but really not that much. I mean, I actually made $3,000 off of buttons in COVID.
I was going to say, you did.
Oh, no, 5,000 total.
You did pretty good. And it was a very short window.
Yeah. But the thing is that the number of hours I had to put into it, I was basically working for minimum wage. Mm-hmm. So like I as a professional, I'm making, I won't say the number, but I make good money as a working software engineer and manager now. And here I was like printing buttons for minimum wage. Yeah. Like, what am I doing? Why was I doing that?
Well, you enjoyed that because you're creative side. Yeah. That's your kind of relief.
So that's the one thing I take out of it. I did enjoy it, so therefore it wasn't a waste.
Yeah.
But was it a business? Should I have thought of it as a business? No, I should have thought of it as a hobby that was making a little money on the side.
Yeah.
Right? Because it wasn't really making me money. And so that's framed when I've tried to think about other business opportunities in the future. I remember that there are hobbies and there are businesses. If I'm going to really make a run at making this a business, I need to look at all the costs, the supplies, my own time spent, and how much money is there an opportunity to be made there, because and how sustainable is that, because that's what a business does. You make sure that you're actually going to be profitable in the long term.
Yeah.
I did learn some other things from that experience though. Sourcing supplies, like trying to figure out who to get all these blanks from to do all the work.
Yeah.
And the quality of those supplies, how to price items properly. I had these spreadsheets I was trying to be, especially for the roller derby organization, I was trying to be as bare bones as I could be, so I can be honest with like, all right, look, here's how much my time is worth. Here's how much the supplies cost. And I was trying to calculate it to like the penny degree, because I didn't want to feel like I was cheating them.
Yeah. And sometimes you did that as, you went bare bones because, again,
they didn't have any money.
I was going to say upstate New York, people live paycheck to paycheck a lot in upstate New York.
So I look at that as kind of like I was essentially volunteering my time as best I could, making sure that my costs were going to be covered.
Yeah.
I also learned a lot about graphics design though. So, coming from our first experience with Mother Hen's Daycare, I literally had to pay somebody to do almost all the graphics design work.
Yeah.
And by the time
you didn't do that one?
No, we hired a guy out of Canada to do that logo, remember?
Huh.
He was a cartoonist, a budding cartoonist. We caught him before he was on his rise.
I thought you did all our logos except one of the ones we'll be
No, well, we came up with the concept, sketched something, and he made it look professional. Yeah. So anyways, but I have since my graphics design, I have always been artistic, and my graphics design skills have gone up a huge notch since then. So I did take that away from it as well, and that's kind of rolled over into the experiences that are useful for business now, especially when it comes to marketing and advertising and being able to put something together that's appealing. Whether it's actually the thumbnails for this podcast aren't probably going to be particularly interesting, but for some of the other stuff, I do. Maybe we'll come up with some merch ideas associated with the podcast at some point.
Yeah. Wear some sweatshirts, t-shirts.
Yeah.
Hats.
Mugs.
Mugs.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. Transition from there. What we did next, we had ended up relocating again due to my job. I had become a government contractor, and I felt like my relocation or my job was going to be at risk. So we ended up in Maryland. We actually bounced around a couple times. I'll skip that part for the most part, but we bounced around a couple times.
Ones.
Yeah, but we ended up back in Maryland.
So we basically lived in Maryland and New York. Maryland,
pretty much. Virginia, a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And Rochester when we were going to school. But
those were short-lived.
And now we live in Florida.
Permanently.
Permanently. Yeah, this is our final home, final destination. So, but in those times we lived in Maryland, and you had a good business going with your clientele at the salon you were in.
Yep.
And the owners were having trouble, like business trouble. I think, were there 2 or 3 owners? I forget.
2
owners. So they were having trouble. We won't get into those details, not appropriate, but like basically we were thinking about buying their salon.
Yeah.
But having all this experience that we had, we looked at their business, basically the whole situation, what they were asking for it. And I was like, wait a minute, for this price, like they're not doing things to your quality. Like you were renting a space from them, which was fine. But if you were going to do things to your level of quality and the way we would do things to know that we would get our investment back, it just wasn't the right place to do it. And the lease terms they had were horrible.
Terrible.
And the business they had built was horrible. The space was horrible.
Horrible.
And they wanted money. They wanted actually money from us.
Right. But I ended up there because the people
they were really nice people.
Really nice people. Yeah. And it was a percentage versus I paid them rent in the beginning. So I got to build myself first. So that's why I chose that salon in particular. But yeah, it was
and they were wonderful people.
Yeah.
Wonderful stylists, wonderful people, but I just think
the business
part got away from them.
Yeah.
And so when we looked at the deal, like they were hopeful that we were going to kind of bail them out, which I would have done if the business made sense. But when we looked at it, the business didn't just make sense. So we stepped away from that and started looking for what other opportunities are out there. Like if I'm going to pay that much money, I can basically build my own salon, right? So we ended up finding a space, kind of got lucky on a good lease term and all that, and did a complete build out. So we ended up learning a lot of lessons from that experience, but we built a whole salon from the ground up. I mean, it was a leased space, but we got experience with leasing a space, doing the legal aspects of leasing a space and dealing with another entity like that, the build out construction phase, and all the costs associated with that. Well, some you can control, some you can't. Learned a lot of lessons about that. A lot of lessons about marketing.
Employees. But before that, we had to sit there and pretty much come up with our own custom ideas, our vision for the place, which we've really technically never done. The only other one we've done was Mother Hen's Daycare, which, we took 2 rooms of our house and customized it for the kids. So this was our next...
Right, and there were some legal things we needed to deal with that insofar as dealing with the state and learning how to do that. And we did that. That experience conveyed here as well.
Yeah.
Because we had to go through all the state regulations to make sure if any point in time an inspector came in, we knew what all... And that's not just about like, you don't look at that... the way I always looked at it is I'd rather do things above board so I don't have to worry, so I can sleep at night. I don't have to worry about getting fined or anything. I just want to know the right way that I'm expected to do things by state standards. And some of these state standards can be a little bureaucratic and all that, but they're really there with the intention of public safety. So they're good rules. They're good things, to do.
Yeah.
Like I remember being annoyed that you got fined by it because of the way it was, but it was like when the daycare, it was like if you wash your hands in the same sink, like
this was what it was. So our changing station had to be next to a water source, but we when we're done changing the baby, we had to immediately wash our hands, but we couldn't pick up the baby until we washed our hands.
Right.
And so therefore I got dinged for it.
You can't leave the baby unattended though.
You can't leave a baby unattended.
It's a little crazy. And then in the salon world, like you have to keep the hair bin covered because they're worried about like stray hairs or something. Like, all right, fine.
The trash, the towel bins, all have to have covers. Yeah. Even the bathroom has to have a cover on it for sanitary reasons, which again, I didn't know because the salon that I was renting from, they did nothing.
Yeah. So, but coming back on point here, that what I guess the point we're trying to illustrate there is that how these different experiences conveyed to the next, like everything built upon each other. That experience we had all the way back from when we first got started, right? And just trying to scramble and figure things out and work through the state systems. It was a necessary
need. It was a need.
And getting fined once for some stupid thing meant that next time you were running your own business and knew that there was a state agency involved, you were going to make damn sure you followed every policy to the T.
Yep.
So a lot of lessons learned there about dealing with state agencies and regulations and stuff.
Yep.
We also, I don't know if there's any other parts you want to pick apart from that. COVID-19, I feel like nobody could have prepared for that. But having gone through it, taught us a lot. I feel like it did teach us a lot.
Yeah, it taught us a lot.
But let's save COVID-19 for a second. Just understanding what it was like to go through a leasing negotiation, right? The legal aspects.
That was stressful.
Right.
And I was still working, so a lot of this you did on your own, and then trying to help you navigate what I needed with this, with that was really difficult, I feel like.
Well, and also the consequences. Like, I think there comes a point in some of these business negotiations, and I think this happens in every business negotiation, you realize the gravity of what you're about to commit to and sign up for. You better make damn sure that you've got all your, T's crossed and I's dotted before you get to that point, so that doesn't feel like you're taking a gamble. I think actually this is a big lesson learned for me. Oftentimes I would literally think of it more of like a gamble. Like, all right, I'm ready to roll the dice. Let's go. It should not be that. It should be, you've analyzed all the variables. You understand there will be a calculated risk for sure of anything you do.
Yeah.
But if it's a good business deal, odds are in your favor, right?
Yeah.
Just like a casino tries to make sure that the house odds are in their favor.
But some of those meetings, if you recall, I said, no, that's it. I'm not signing. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I pushed you sometimes, and and actually, just to be full disclosure, I feel like maybe we shouldn't have some days,
Some days I feel like we shouldn't have. Absolutely.
No, we ran a good business there, and built an amazing salon and amazing atmosphere. I'm very proud of what we did there. But ultimately,
our clients love it.
The biggest problem we have came down to employees. Right? We learned a lot about managing employees, I think. Well, all the aspects of dealing with employees, let's say.
It was...
Even you had some good ones that went sideways, right?
Yeah.
We had a lot of bad ones that we thought were good, and then they didn't. Yeah, people who we gave a chance that ended up, screwing us in one way or another, or just not meeting
And then
up.
the one that you thought and put everything, all your trust into, just you happen to catch them doing things that they weren't supposed to.
Right.
And I was in tears.
Yeah.
For a couple of days, because it was just like, how
because it felt like family kind of cheating you or something.
And again, I learned a lesson not to treat employees like family, which I think
that's I think that's a careful one. I do like to be able to treat employees like family. Like, I don't want to be scarred by that for life. It could just be we had a bad person,
Yeah.
But we did, keeping a professional business relationship, I think, was a good lesson from that.
Yeah.
I also think an important lesson from that was one of the things we really ignored in our business plan was how easy or difficult it was going to be to get the type of quality employees that you would demand for your business. We would have had to we would have had to train them from scratch, which we couldn't afford to do.
Right. We did with 2, right? 2.
Right.
We did with 3, but it was just like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
So we had to let her go. But 2 of them, we put I feel like our heart and soul into them.
Yeah.
And that was hard. The whole employee, that's a whole nother.
Yeah. Dealing with employees itself was a difficult thing. What I was getting at there is that we underestimated that in our business plan, the employees were an essential part. If we really wanted, we built an 8-seat salon that when Alexa was there, our daughter, and Miranda was there as well, we had many chairs operating. Mm-hmm. But the business plan called for like at least 6 of those chairs to be even if half of those chairs would be operating. If we had 4 or 3 extra employees in addition to you, we would have been raking in the money. But instead, now, especially after COVID, it's just you. We have an 8-chair salon with only you there.
As of March 2023, it's been just me. So almost a full year, just me.
Almost a full year, just you, right? That's because we had an employee problem. But we did. We went down from like maybe 5 employees down to 4, down to 3, and then COVID happened. We ended up with only 2, and now it's just you. So COVID was an interesting one. I don't want to make this all about COVID, but just to share some business lessons there. Our county actually was amazing in how many resources, Anne Arundel County in Maryland was amazing with how many resources they provided businesses to help get through this, like hand sanitizer grants and things like this. working with the businesses to try to open in a safe way. I thought they did a really good job of that.
It was a little frustrating.
Yeah.
Because of the square footage and how many people were supposed to be in there when we came back.
At first, right.
At first. Actually, it was like the first year and a half back. It was hard because my clientele is what pays the bills, and having the other girls that were with us, which at the time was 3, and figuring out schedule and how many clients we had to have in there, including ourselves. It was hard. It was very hard emotionally. The girls didn't understand.
Nobody did, though, in fairness. That was a whole new world for everyone. But there was a couple interesting, like as a business lesson, I know it's good practice to have a contingency plan and some kind of rainy day money.
Yeah.
But we never had that. We were operating on the wire.
I mean, literally, we opened up in 2018.
Yeah.
The end, July 2018. We had I feel like a great first year all through 18, 19.
Yeah.
And literally, COVID happened. So we were a year and a half in.
It really stung our growth.
It stung. I mean, we've kept afloat. We kept afloat because our clients are very dedicated. But it was, I mean, I feel like if COVID never happened.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I don't want to get into, because COVID happened to everybody, right?
Yeah.
But what business lessons can we take off of that? One was we didn't have a contingency plan.
Yeah.
We were lucky because our landlord offered a lease extension to help people get through this. I've heard most landlords said, no, you signed a lease, you have to pay the money or else you're in default. Like, some landlords were really mean about it.
I didn't know that.
And difficult. Like our landlord actually gave us 2 different extensions because they knew like the businesses aren't pulling any money. So at least they gave us extension to like basically we didn't have to pay, but then we extended the lease. Or I think one of the times we had to like pay half or something like that towards the end. They were doing the best they could because they had to pay their bills too, right?
Right.
And nobody had these contingencies. I think now actually I've heard that a lot of leases have a natural disasters and maybe even a COVID clause in them to say like, even during something like a pandemic, you still have to pay your rent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like,
that sucks.
Yeah. So you know how these landlords are. They always make sure that every single base is covered. And now the world has experienced this together. They've got one more loophole sealed up,
Yeah.
But as a business lesson though, I try to look at it, especially in the context of this podcast, is what was the business lesson to take from that? And we didn't have enough of a contingency for an event like that.
A safety net.
Yeah. So let's see. So that's kind of the story of us getting from bankruptcy to salon owner with a lot of life lessons and personal details along the way. I guess what I want to say in recap is just like, let's take some lessons learned from this story we've been telling, right? We kept moving no matter what life threw at us. We always were looking ahead. What's the next thing? Or at least how can we make the best of this situation or find a way to make some money in this situation, right? Mm-hmm. Mother Hen's Daycare, I think, is a perfect example of that. And to a large degree, so is the salon.
Yeah.
It was like you were about to lose that and lose all your customers and not have a better alternative.
It was a panic moment.
We saw an opportunity. Yeah. And I think it's important to look, like we learned something. So don't be afraid to jump in. And if things don't work out or if things don't work out the way you thought they would, or, a lot of businesses have a cycle, like you start them, they have a productive life cycle, and then you end them. You either sell them or you close them. They had a purpose though. And you learned something along the way. Like each one of these businesses have made us money along the way. Maybe not as much as we had imagined, but they made us money along the way. More importantly though, we learned something along the way, right? You learned something with every one of those businesses.
With every one of them. I think the one that sticks with me the most is I have to be my own boss. I cannot work for anybody else. I have to be my own boss. The other one is...
I literally call her the boss.
Yeah, I have to be my own boss. I work very well with other people.
Right.
It's just I want control of my own destiny.
Of your reputation and your quality. And
the products, everything, down to toilet paper. Down to toilet paper. I need control over.
Right.
But yeah, every lesson, and I think from bankruptcy to literally panicking into opening up Mother Hen's Daycare, that was the first one. Like, okay, I can never work for somebody else, know. And that was a hard hustle because that one was needed. And then I think everything after that, every business after that, it's because we want to be our own businesses because we've learned so much from where we had to go into business.
Yeah, or saw an opportunity that was just,
that
fit us perfectly. Yeah, and so I guess you covered this last point I wanted to make sure of is the best side hustles come from necessity. I think that's true. My layoff forced us into that one situation. The salon closing forced you into another situation.
Yeah.
And I think just sometimes people are just too afraid to jump in. I know some of the things we did took some money as well, but not all side hustles and not all business endeavors require an investment like we had to make in some of these cases. It's just don't be afraid to get in. You got to start somewhere. If you're starting, whatever your number is, if you're starting with $100 and learning how to make 1,000, or starting with 1,000 and learning how to make 10, whatever. It's just you're just ranking up every time. You're learning something.
You're learning something.
Yeah.
There's always a lesson in everything that you do in life.
Yep. So I guess one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up is kind of a teaser for our next episode. So next episode, we're going to be talking about what some of the side hustles are that we've been considering for this next phase in life. We're going to actually evaluate some of them. And then in future episodes, we're going to pick one and tell you why. I think we're actually going to put this like on a Patreon somehow, so that supporters who want to see that, like the details of our journey, like all the references I came up with, the resources I pulled up, maybe even I'll keep a spreadsheet showing profits and losses, so that folks who want to see what we did and how it's working out can follow all the nitty gritty details. We won't cover the nitty gritty details in the podcast, but put it up on a Patreon somewhere that folks can access, so that you can actually like kind of be a passenger on this journey with us and see how one of these hustles is working and what we're able to do with it. And we'll be honest with you, if something works and we fail at it, we'll tell you that, and we'll show you the numbers and show you how that worked.
Yeah.
If something succeeds, then we'll show you as many numbers as we can before things get so crazy that we can't show you numbers anymore.
Yeah. Our goal is to succeed.
Right.
At all times.
Our mission here, and not just in the podcast and life, is to be able to achieve financial freedom with one of these, eventually one of these other side hustles. So I'd be happy with, I don't need to be a millionaire. I just need to be able to pay off the house, pay off all the bills, and do kind of a financial reset.
Yeah.
And we have a couple ideas for some side hustles that'll get us
Some
there.
of them are exciting. Some of them are like, I don't know. It's kind of a risk taking, but
so we'll talk about that in future episodes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you very much for staying with us.
Thank you. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe.